And today I'm focusing on the very first private recordings in this project. So this project is about acoustic letters from the beginning of the sound recording till the compact cassettes, also on analog carriers. Yeah, I want to talk about some of the first findings in the SONIME project. It is a heritage science research project that is carried out in the two audio archives in Vienna. As I already told, the Österreichische Mediathek, it is part of the Vienna Museum of Science and Technology and the Phonogrammarchiv at the Austrian Academy of Sciences in Vienna. We, that is Katrin Abromeit, an audio preservation and conservation specialist, and me as a historian. And we have two student assistants, Johann Hinterstoiser and Dominik Ivancic, who help us with the research. In our project, we combine cultural history with conservation research and material analysis. While I mostly do the research and analysis in regards of cultural history and theory of the voice, my colleague Katrin Abromeit is the conservator and the one who is the expert in material questions. Currently, she's on maternal leave, that's why she cannot be here today, and I will therefore summarize the material and conservation issues. For the Heritage Science Austria program, that's again our poster of the Austrian Academy of Sciences, which funds research on objects which are especially worthy of preservation. Katrin Abromeit and I have proposed our research project SONIME on acoustic cultural heritage, namely on acoustic greetings and audio letters that are extraordinary, unique and rare items. What is left of them in the archives and museums today does not represent the use of this medium since the end of the 19th century, because sending audio letters was much more widespread than we would assume today. Even if, and that is clear, the very early techniques had its failures and did not develop into mass media as the later formats like tape and the compact cassettes did. But there still are very early home recordings, private greetings, dictation recordings and voice letters, some of which I can share with you today, and some of which are waiting to be found. What is our goal in our project? Till now, we already found quite a lot of rare and unique recordings in our project, but we would not have found them only through researching the catalogs. The reason why we know so less about audio letters like these is that they have seldom been collected from archives and museums, and thus often have been sorted out as only private recordings of no-name people. That means that the collecting part, is essential for researching them, essential for producing knowledge that again leads to better possibilities of preservation and documentation through databases and catalogs. What we find now in the archives is characterized by early collection strategies that often have excluded private sources. This is especially true for private sources produced in migration contexts that are per se characterized by discontinuity and fragility. The collections of the two host archives of our project have their own and different histories, and there are a lot of reasons why there is what there is. But when we search for audio letters in the archives, we find losses and lacks, and we find a lot that is missing. So our goal is to build a reference collection of audio letters, which will be at the same time a reference collection of private recording formats and dictation formats in general. As we are part of Heritage Science Austria, we focus on Austria. That means on messages sent from or to Austria. And we also decided to focus on analog sound carriers. That means carriers from wax cylinders to direct cut discs to tape and all cassette formats. Whereas today I focus on the early recordings. Which, by the way, also means that we should be careful when listening to me with headphones, because the sound sample often will start with loud noises. So in addition to the search in the archives, we will spread calls in the media, we contact private collectors, associations and communities. But what we already hear within our selected material till now is that the technical changes also change the users and the speaking situations. we hear more voices of color, more working class voices on tape and on compact cassettes than on direct cut discs or on cylinder. The more widespread the devices were, the more democratic they got. This is our microphone. This also concerns the question of who recorded whom. While white anthropologists recorded the voices and languages of black and indigenous people in a colonial habitus at the turn of the last century, the compact cassettes were used by people of color themselves and for themselves and their own communication and empowerment. In addition to the collecting part and all that comes with it, which is the whole documentation, photographic pictures of the objects, database work, developing new fields of documentation, our idea of participatory archive. In addition to that, we have two scientific focuses, the material analysis on the one hand, and the analysis of the voice as a cultural technique and a carrier of meaning beyond the spoken word on the other. Before I will share with you some theoretical reflections on our research questions, I would like to give you a short overview of the earliest voice letters and private recordings. Example, listen to these greetings recorded in December 1909. It didn't work?
Yeah, it didn't, but I don't think. Yeah, I don't think
No, I don't have to play it again. I just, okay. I mean, I would have the next example. So, yeah, as you can hear, also at this in this example is how long wax cylinders like this could be. So it's not too short. It's only 2.5 minutes, but there is a lot of place and room and possibilities to say something. This message was recorded on a wax cylinder with a phonograph invented by Edison in 1878. The use of wax as a material medium and the wax cylinder was established in the late 1880s. Besides the commercially released cylinders, there also existed wax blanks for home recordings. They could be reused by shaving off the old grooves. In this way, they have been an early rewritable medium. For those home recordings, the identification information as well as playback speed is often impossible, as we mostly only have the descriptions on the packaging and no further information. The cylinder you did just hear is part of an extraordinary collection of more than 650 home wax recordings that were made by everyday people. Most of them were collected by David Giovannoni at the University of California, Santa Barbara. Today they use ESP cylinder audio archive. The possibility of sound recording was also used to capture sounds, songs, and impressions of everyday life. One particular collection of acoustic greetings that were phonographed in Austria and taken to the US is the Florian Fuchs collection in the UCSB Cylinder Archive at the University of California, Santa Barbara. Florian Fuchs, an Austrian, he emigrated to the United States in 1887 as a teenager. After 25 years in 1912, he returned to his home village in Austria for a few weeks, where he had been born. There, his relatives and old friends recorded their voices for him and his family. They spoke messages, recorded songs, played instruments, and also recorded sounds like the church bells as an acoustic memory compilation from home. The collection consists of over 30 wax cylinders that his family and friends have recorded for him and his family, and that he took back to his new home in America. So let's listen to two of these two. Please tell me if you can't hear it.
No.
Oh no. No, it's. I want to. Yeah. Ah, okay. So this is in German, and you can read the English translation. So I don't know if you could understand anything, but what's also interesting in this, if you are starting to work with this media and with these objects, you start to learn to listen somehow, and it gets better. At the beginning, there's just noise. And I also wanted to show you another one of these 33 cylinders, because they are singing on it, and yeah. So I just played the beginning. I will. Yeah, so they are singing 2 minutes. And in the end, Josef Fuchs, who was the one who went back to America, he said the last sentences. It was recorded Friday, November 22. In 1912, it was the last night at 1 o'clock in the night before he left. And there was his family and friends and schoolmates there. So, yeah. What is interesting is that Edison, yeah, here you can also see wax cylinders which we found in the Österreichische Mediathek, but we have not digitized them yet. And if we had, they would have been in German anyways. But you can see on them it's written inscriptions such as "Sung by Mother," "Baptism of Joseph in 1901," "By Grandmother, Come to the Gondola." So we assume that also there will be songs, and they were playing with instruments on this, the 11 cylinders we found. And all of these items are really rare items and very unique items, because they, there is no production behind it, and they don't exist 1,000 times, just one time. Edison, the inventor of the phonograph, already had the recording of dictation letters and postal letters in mind for the use of his invention. And only as a further possibility, he thought of music playback even though the music part then developed into the largest and most lucrative field in the cylinder industry. But in general, with the invention of sound recording, a long dreamed of fantasy that till then has only existed in mythology and art became a real technical possibility. To separate the voice from the body and save it on a carrier medium to be able to listen to it again and again, in another place and at another time. And since then you find debates in journals and newspapers about how to send these records, these three-dimensional cylinders as a letter, also by post. As Thomas Ledin pointed out, he houses the world's biggest voice letter archive at the Princeton University. He said that the acoustic letters meant also a shift of handwriting to oral letter writing. And the medium changed the access to letter writing for those who could neither read nor write, the access of epistolary communication to the illiterate. That includes also children, grandmothers and fathers who cannot see or read anymore, babies who cry or just babble. One suggestion for sending the back cylinder by post was made in 1901. You can see it here. It is a wooden box who could safely carry smaller cylinders and was especially designed for sending them per post. As said here, it's a translation in English. The cylinder is extra short so that it can be placed in a cube-shaped wooden box whose dimensions do not exceed those prescribed for letter post. Such a short cylinder contains quite sufficient space for a phonographic message that would fill several pages as a letter. At the same time, the price of both the wax cylinder and the box is so low that this novelty will undoubtedly become very well established. Another possibility was this device from the French company Pathé. It was introduced in 1908, the Pathé Post. With a horn, one could speak messages onto the discs. With the horns, but also with headphones, you could listen to them. And what was especially handy for sending them per post, it was a flat disc that you could simply put into an envelope. Since the quality depended on the recording technique, the instructions for use gave precise directions. You can see it is in German, and it means hold the mouth and nose in the horn, speak according to the figure and clearly, without rushing and without moving the head. Pathé Post discs were double-sided and available in two sizes. The smaller discs, 11 centimeters, had a recording time of 3 minutes. The larger ones of about 5 minutes. Immediately after recording, a brush should be used to remove the wax shavings, and Pathé Post was sold in limited quantities through World War I, after which its name was changed to Phonograph. You can also see an announcement here. And what you can see often in announcements or advertisements like that until the 50s and the 60s is that the man speaks and the woman receives what is said listening. It's not always like this, but it really is often like this. And we also have the situation at the office and the dictation cylinders. I will speak about that later. We found some Pathé Post discs, blanks, in the Österreichische Mediathek, but only one of them contains cut grooves and thus contains a recording track. Another one with grooves is exhibited lying on its device at the Vienna Museum of Science and Technology. We have not yet digitized them, but we will be able to do it by optical transfer methods. But already we know that the quality of these recordings was not so high, and they were often difficult to understand, especially when they have been played. And it must be added that only a few people did speak into the horn the proper way, in order to get the maximum clarity. And of course, the recording medium itself was quite fragile and the wax coating very soft. Here you can see the device that is exhibited in the Vienna Museum of Science and Technology. We also want to try to scan the disc too, and are very curious what we will find on it. And a few years earlier, in 1906, there was a similar device on the market, the phonopostal and the phonocards SONIME, also produced in France. It allowed the recordings of one's voice into a small cardboard box the size of a postcard. One could also write a small message on this card. It had a postcard motif on it, and you could send it by post. The problem was, with all of these things, it should be addressed to a recipient who also owned the phonopostal to play the recording. And here you can see the slogan. You don't have to write anymore. N'écrivez plus. This message, don't write, send a record, is also used later till the 50s and 60s as an advertisement. I want to show you a small excerpt of a lecture by Thomas Levin about the Sonorine postcards. Yeah. Let's try it.
Here's a so we scanned them, and this is what the aggregated scan looks like on the laptop. Then we calculate the height fields once we can look inside the grooves, and then we can hear the audio. Let's listen to it.
Madame, Monsieur, avec notre petit appareil aménagé spécialement à cet effet, et sur nos cartes sonorines, on peut parler, chanter ou siffler. Vivre les vacances avant la rentrée, les maîtres sont à bord. Oh, je vois qu'il a la petite dans la bouche. Il est en train de se concerter avec son camarade pour savoir quelle est la plus forte.
So, ladies and gentlemen, with our little machine, which is organized specially for this purpose, and using our Sonorine cards, you can speak, you can sing, you can whistle, and then he does some of all of those things. Here's another one. More or less the same thing. Many of the best recordings were probably demonstration recordings by the salesman who knew that to get a good audio, you had to speak into the horn. And if you didn't do that, if you spoke back like this, the recording was, not surprisingly, poor. I sing really bad, he says. So,
do you see the PowerPoint presentation?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, so what you could notice in this example was a shift to flat discs for the postal use and the envelope. But neither the Sonorine nor the Pâté Post did come close to the quality and consistency of the cylinder at the same time. But there has been a need of voice records that did not have to be flat, because you did not have to send them by post, the dictation cylinders. You can see here two of them we found also in the illustration bibliothek. The new voice recording technology also quickly found use in the office. For this purpose, not shorter but longer cylinders were produced, which had a little more recording time. A timeline was usually attached to the dictation machines, as well as headphones for listening to the messages. What is important to know that the producing companies avoided compatibility between the equipment for office use and the home recording market. With the dictating equipment for the office, it was not possible to listen to music recordings and vice versa. Dictate cylinders were not compatible for the device people used at home for listening to music. With regard to the category gender, it is interesting that a lot of devices and formats were developed for the male boss that sends his dictates to the female secretary. This could be an own topic for research, and with it the sexistic advertisements in the 1950s and 60s, you can see here, about a sexualized secretary as the boss's compliant subject of the company Dictaphone. It was the same company. But that also means that women used this technique, although they preserved the male messages with it. Also, again, Thomas Levine, he has already emphasized that given its early use in the office, it is not surprising that the female body became the metaphor of the phonographic correspondence. As in the signature of the phonographic journal, the medium by which the acoustic was translated into the written was the female body itself, as you can see here. But there was also female resistance to it. In January 1913, the Österreichische Frauenrundschau published the letter of a female stenotypist who drew attention to the fact that female employees were being paid less with the increasing use of dictation machines, such as the dictaphone. Aptly, she exposed the sexist bias of the dictaphone sales brochure, and this is now again in 1913, which promised benefits but only for male employees, while only disadvantages resulted for female workers. I quote this article with the translation in English. The typist provides herself with the listening apparatus in the manner of that used by female telephonists. The same heats the ears, and one still has the feeling of having the apparatus attached to the ears all evening, whereupon the dictaphone is put into and out of operation by means of a pedal operated by the foot. If one has not understood a word, or if one cannot follow the apparatus fast enough, the pedal must be released with a jerk. Otherwise, the apparatus will continue to work. Another demand on the nerves. As can be seen from the above, hands, feet, ears are busy at once, not to mention the brain, which has to pay attention to the correct formation of sentences, punctuation, new paragraphs. Yeah, also she wanted to, she called for a refusal of jobs in which the employees are forced to work with the dictaphones out of this. But she had little success with her resistance and call for sabotage, because the dictation machine was so successful that, for example, the Viennese sales company was looking for larger premises and offices. Yeah, and so this was a studio of the dictaphone company itself in Massachusetts. There you can see how this looked like. And we also can listen to one of the rare dictates that the UCSB Cylinder archive hosts. But this is even more difficult to listen to. I will try it out.
Before serving in settlement of your account, yours very truly. P.S. We do not think that after such a late day that Mrs. Beecher should have any claim on us, that she has never written to us one letter or word of
You can rarely understand it, but what you can see, it has nearly 8 minutes. It was longer, and there are several business letters on it. The man dictates them, and the secretary had to write them into letters. But back again to the letters. To the flat disks. The self-recording technology on flat disks only became popular at the end of the 1920s, and since the beginning of the 1930s, when the era of electric recording with microphones started. Used primarily in radio for recording live broadcasts, It also found its way into private sphere, and an amateur community was established. The variety of materials observable in direct cut discs and instantaneous discs reflects the efforts of the manufacturing companies at the time to develop a functional combination of materials. The challenge was the coating had to be soft enough for cutting during recording, and at the same time sufficiently hard for the scanning needle during playback. For this purpose, single-layer systems made of softer materials, such as gelatine, the direct cut foils, or even zinc or aluminium were produced, like this ones, as well as multi-layer systems made of a stable carrier with a coating, like this tonica. Numerous guidebooks and instructions for self-recording show the increased use. In tourist hotspots, as well as in larger cities, recording studios and voice boxes enjoyed great popularity in public places worldwide, where one could record one's voice for little money and take the cut record in an envelope. Here you can see Dorothy Caruso, the widow of the tenor. She opened a speakerphone voice letter studio in June 1929. And yeah, and this is a voiceograph. They were like singles, very small discs, and you could record them in record booths in the city. In Vienna, for example, at the Burggasse, as you see here, it's written on it, had been such a booth. You could go into it, put a coin into it, and get your disc with your voice on it, and also an envelope. And it looked like this. Here you can see an instruction, and you can also see again this imagination of the man who is traveling around and he is speaking, and the woman at home with her dress listens to the longed voice of her husband. What is also really interesting in these instructions, if you read them, there was then how to make the recording. For example, there were similar lights that showed how many seconds you had to go. At the beginning, 65 seconds. When another light came, you still have 30 seconds to go. Then was a warning, the recording ends in 10 seconds, and then was stop sign, the recording is complete. And also there you can see a few suggestions that were made. For example, sing your favorite song. Send greetings to relatives and friends back home. Mail a record letter home to mother, dad, the family. Tell about your trip. Record your child's voice. And you may talk about the following. Where are you now? Who are you with? What are your plans? And so on. But this really was needed, and it's interesting that we can listen to this on the voice letters, that a lot of people don't know what to say. I mean, you could imagine if you would try it, then you're standing there, you want to do it, you're imagining your friends, family, beloved persons, and then you only have some minutes, and then it's really often that they are starting with, I don't know what to say. Yeah, and to show how widespread this phenomenon was, also geographically, I show you again a video of the conservator in the Netherlands. It's in Dutch, and I also don't understand Dutch, but I think it's a very small piece. You can understand what it is about.
Weer zo'n spraakberichtje via WhatsApp. Steeds meer mensen doen dat in plaats van zo'n lang bericht te moeten typen. En trouwens, bellen wordt volgens mij ook steeds minder gedaan. Maar wat als je in de jaren 30 nou een spraakbericht had willen versturen? Dan had je dit apparaat. Stap 1. Je koopt een penning aan het loket. Werp je hierin. Hendeltje omlaag en je gaat je bericht inspreken. De tijd stopt, het lampje knipperde en het plaatje werd afgeleverd hier aan de zijkant. Dan kon je hem eventjes beluisteren of het wel goed was geworden. En dan nam je hem eruit en dan ging je aan deze kant met een andere penning van ongeveer 15 cent in het begin. Hendeltje omlaag en dan kwam hier je envelopje uit, waarin je dus het Phonopos-plaatje netjes kon versturen. En daarbij kreeg je ook nog een heel klein envelopje met 2 naalden. En dat waren speciale naalden om het plaatje af te kunnen spelen.
Ik weet niks meer. Ik had alles op zijn briefje staan. Ik lag mijn doodplaatje nog niet vol.
In die tijd kon je natuurlijk met elkaar bellen.
Yeah, another reason why I chose this video is because we often have to do with messages we don't understand. So they are, of course, in many different languages, and we have to translate it from native people who understand them. But we also focus on the audio acoustic signals, what tells us or what can be told, what can we interpret, even if we don't understand the words. And especially the acoustic track is interesting for us, and then you can use it as a method when you don't understand what is spoke. But of course, we interpret them also with native speakers. Yeah, the most common systems for voicemail in Austria were the delete, Phonograph, Dictaphone, and phonogram discs. Here you can see a disc of the company Phonograph. It was in Vienna in the 1930s, and they produced discs also for professional use, but also cheaper ones for amateurs. And they had also studios in Vienna where you could go in and record your voice. The most affordable of this was the Vienna Phonoson. Here's the monograph, the pictures of the monograph. And this was the Phonoson cutting system, and with its logo of a record going around the world in an envelope. While some critics complained about the poor quality of Phonoson in the days of electric recording, others emphasized that with a little skill, even passable recordings could be made with it. Yeah, and now I want to go a little bit deeper in our research questions and use a little bit of theory. I have a look at the time, but I think we have enough time for that. So I want to give you some insights along our research questions. Yeah, the one part is the sonic memories part, and the other part is the material analysis. And the second part I will go through very fast, because this is especially my colleague does this. But the sonic memories part. Here we want to know in what ways audio letters did serve as memory objects during migration and mobility. And how did they connect those who left and those who stayed? Can you hear that on the messages itself? With the term memory object, we want to highlight the entanglement of materiality and the processes of substituting for the missing, the absent, processes of longing and processes of remembering. We here also want to combine memory and acoustic phenomena, which is still an under-researched field compared to the standing that visual media, for example, have for theories of memory. And it goes with the thesis that the acoustic letter substitutes somehow the absent person. But it is not only a substitute, it is also a method of living a relationship, stay in contact, stay in touch. When I listened to some audio letters, I got the impression that the letters are not only memory objects for those who receive them, but also for those who speak and create them. Sometimes you can literally hear how a missing conversation with a beloved person is reenacted by speaking, and that speaking is an attempt and also a way to overcome the loneliness. And now I want to show you one example. I think it's working. This is a disc of the Phonopost archive of Thomas Levin, we heard before. Okay, it's a love letter, an Argentinian love letter in Spanish to René. And it's also a reason that you will immediately, you know, what it is about when you hear a voice.
Quiero yo por siempre estar a tu lado en sueño de amor, nuestro amor eterno. Vení, sueña de mí, cierra más tus ojos. Yo estoy a tu lado con mi cariño. Vení, quiero besarte. Te beso, vení, te beso. Querida, vení. ¿Me quieres, Nene? ¿Me quieres? Tanto. Como tantas estrellas hay en el cielo. Y en la noche calma, tantos suspiros y armonías. Para nosotros dos. Amas la noche, Nene. Y la has recibido hermosa.
Yeah, I think it's good to have this in mind, this voicelet, when you think about the theory. Because speaking to a person who is not there, it's also imagining the other person and pretending as if two people were talking. And it's then not seldom interrupted by noticing the apparently wrong situation. This is noticeable when the equipment is mentioned, for example, the devices, the tape, the microphone. Sentences like, but instead of talking to you, what I'm trying to do, I sit here in front of a microphone and can't say what I want to say. And our second question is, how does the speaking on a record as well as listening to a recorded voice of a beloved person enable closeness and intimacy in times of being apart? This question is related to the idea that a person's voice seems so identical with the individuality of a person herself. So much of the person is inscribed in the voice, the gender, the age, the class, the habitus. You can recognize a person immediately when you hear her voice. The whole range of affects finds expression in the voice, whether as intentional or as a masquerade, or when the voice reveals what should remain hidden. The voice affects you when you hear it. It is in the room. You cannot just close your eyes or distance yourself. The voice seems three-dimensional. When hearing it, it's literally in your body. I also think this question of how the voice is able to produce this kind of intimacy and that immediately with psychoanalytical theory. I want to give you two examples. The psychoanalyst Susanne Maiello described the voice as a sound object for the fetus. The fetus is used to sounds of the maternal body, which are characterized by steadiness, such as the heartbeat or breathing. In contrast to that, the voice is a sound that is not steady. Sometimes it is there and sometimes not. For the fetus, the voice is the first external object that is unpredictable and uncontrollable, just as the breast will be later when the child is born. And Maiello connects this disappearance of the voice to a very early experience of absence and loss, and thus missing and longing to an early awareness of another and someone that is not me. And also the psychoanalyst Jacques Lacan included the voice to the objects klein a, that give desire its cause. Objects of desire are produced through encounter with the other and keep this encounter going. In the voice, this happens in a particularly intimate way. Among these objects, the voice has the most direct relationship to the other. So voice, according to Lacan, is the only witness that the other is not only an illusion. And I think this is very important when you think about voice letters. So according to these explanations of why the voice is so special and why we sometimes want to hear the voice of a beloved person, sending audio letters seems to do several things. It reassures the speakers and listeners that the other, who is far away and with whom one cannot sit together and talk, is not only an illusion, that the other really exists. It is indeed a way to get in touch through the voice and is connected to a longing and a desire. And by recording, by writing the voice into a material and thus transforming the voice into a written track, one can create the illusion that the voice has overcome the ephemeral, just like the wish that your desires will come true in the end. And so the materiality, the fact that there is an object, means you can take your family and your home with you to America. Yeah, I mean, that's mostly what I wanted to talk about, because the second part, the material culture, I just wanted to show you a little bit what we are doing in our project. So the questions are, what does the specific material composition tell us about the historical use and meaning of the audio letters? What conservation measures need to be undertaken? Katrin prepared some pictures where you can see the different deterioration patterns of instantaneous discs. For example, cracks and fractures in the lacquer, crystallizations from plasticizer, exudation, imprints of and deposit from adjacent materials. So these are the discs Katrin has to restore it. And shrunken and drawn lacquer layers. Loose layers, layer separation, blocking and losses. But it also means that these discs in archives, in audio and sound archives, are often just thrown away, or they're just lying in the cellars, because till now there is no clear way out of it, or way to do restoration, which restoration measures should be done, and also how this disc should be archived in the first place. Yeah, so there are also questions about what does the specific material, and this I already told you. Yeah. We also have a device for material analysis. While Katrin is on maternal leave, our student assistant Johann Hinterstreusser is doing this. So this is also the basis of the conservation measures, that we know which material compositions and combinations are there. And with which it also means how can we clean them, for example, which is very important, that you clean them before digitize them and don't disturb them by cleaning it. And this is already the last video. It is a movie from 1948, 2 small sequences for the end.
Look, Pinky, make a record of your voice for me. Doesn't cost very much.
We haven't got a gramophone.
If ever you're away, I can borrow one, and then I can hear your voice.
All right. You asked me to make a record of my voice. Well, here it is. What you want me to say is I love you. It is the truth. I hate you, you little slut. You make me sick. Why don't you get back to Nelson Place and leave me be?
Don't think I repent, I don't. I repent not dying.
Go on. Don't be afraid.
I ought to have gone with him. I ought to have gone with him. I don't want any absolution ever. I'd be with him if I was damned too. That woman saying he wanted to get rid of me. She doesn't know a thing about love.
Perhaps she was right, my child.
And you don't either. I know. I've got proof. I've got his voice. I don't want to be forgiven. I'm afraid of missing him.
My child, there's always hope. It's the air we breathe. You can't understand, nor I, nor anyone for that matter, the appalling strangeness of the mercy of God. We have to hope and pray.
I want to help, but I don't know how.
You say he loved you. There's hope.
Even that sort of love.
Any love.
He loved me. I'll show you he loved me. Mother, can I?
If you want to.
You asked me to make a record of my voice. Well, here it is. What you want me to say is I love you. 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 I love you.
Yeah, that's the end of the movie. I mean, he's a cruel criminal. I wanted to say it before.
Omrkni naše topky pro mazlíčky každé 2 týdny.
And she's very naive and fell in love with him. And yeah, it shows the eternal voice somehow. It shows that you hear what you want to hear, and it shows the broken materiality, the disc, how important this is, and also the possibility of speaking love letters and hate letters if you want to. Yeah, so this is my input. I'm interested in your questions, if you have some, and also in experiences, your own experiences with voice letters, because the voice messages on WhatsApp today or Telegram, I think a lot of young people are using this now. And it would also be great to think about how we do this today, and is there a connection to the past somehow? What does it mean for you when you listen to a voice of your friend? I mean, this is more in an everyday media, I think, more than this letters I spoke about that you sent when you could not listen to each other. But nevertheless, it's a difference if you read a SMS or a message than to listen to it. So I'm curious in all of your thinkings about this topic.